Charles Askins didn't live in the Old West. He lived like it never ended. Long after the frontier was fenced, tamed, and written into mythology, Askins carried its mindset into the 20th century. He was a federal lawman, a U.S. Army officer, a master marksman, and one of the most controversial figures ever associated with American gun culture. To some, he was a fearless professional, calm under pressure, disciplined, and extraordinarily skilled with firearms. To others, he was something far more troubling than a man who seemed to embrace violence, a man who questioned his own mental stability, and whose actions, if judged by modern standards, would raise serious ethical concerns. Either way, Charles Askins remains impossible to ignore. His life spanned the evolution of American law enforcement, 2 world wars, the rise of the Cold War, and the transformation of firearms training from frontier instinct to institutional doctrine. Along the way, he became a legend not because his story is comfortable, but because it forces us to confront where skill, authority, and morality collide. In this video, we're diving deep into the life, career, and controversies of Charles Askins, a man who embodied the frontier spirit long after the frontier was supposed to be gone. And once you hear his story, you'll understand why his name still sparks debate today. Charles Askins began his career in a region that still felt closer to the 19th century than the modern age, the American Southwest. He worked first with the U.S. Forest Service and later with the U.S. Border Patrol, at a time when federal agencies were still defining their authority along the southern border. This was not desk work. The early Border Patrol operated across vast, unforgiving terrain. Smuggling, illegal crossings, armed confrontations, and organized criminal activity were common. Agents often worked alone or in small teams, far from backup, relying on personal judgment and instinct. Askins thrived in this environment. He was involved in numerous armed encounters, many of which ended violently. By his own accounts, these confrontations left a lasting impression on him, not because they frightened him, but because of how easily he adapted to them. In later writing, Askins admitted something unsettling. Danger energized him. Where others felt fear, he felt clarity. Where most people hesitated, he acted. This trait earned him respect among some peers and quiet concern among others. Because what Askins would later admit about himself raises a disturbing question. Was he drawn to danger or dependent on it? At the time, however, the Border Patrol valued decisiveness. The rules were loose, oversight was minimal, and agents had wide discretion. In this environment, Askins developed a reputation as someone you wanted beside you when things went bad. But reputation cuts both ways. While supporters praised his composure, critics argued that Askins sometimes blurred the line between duty and personal judgment. Even within the rough standards of early federal enforcement, his willingness to engage violence set him apart. This tension between professionalism and personal appetite for risk would follow him for the rest of his life. Askins was not only a man of action, he was obsessed with mastery. He became a dominant figure in competitive shooting, winning national championships and earning a reputation as one of the finest pistol shots in the country. To him, marksmanship was not sport, it was discipline. During 1 decade alone, Askins claimed to have fired more than 750,000 documented rounds in practice. This level of repetition reflected the era's belief that skill was forged through relentless live-fire training. Eventually, he rose to become chief firearms instructor for the U.S. Border Patrol, giving him enormous influence over how agents trained, thought, and prepared for armed encounters. He also believed standard equipment was inadequate. Askins modified firearms to suit real-world conditions like short-range fights, low-light environments, and unpredictable terrain. One of his most notable projects involved the Remington Model 11 shotgun, which he shortened, reinforced, and fitted with an extended magazine, creating a compact, high-capacity law enforcement weapon decades ahead of its time. But the most influential weapon Askins ever redesigned wasn't a gun, it was the holster. Working with holster maker Bears, Askins helped refine a design that prioritized speed, consistency, and security. The result was a drop-loop holster with a forward cant, reinforced mouth, and snap retention strap optimized for horseback patrol, rugged terrain, and rapid draw. This holster remained in service for years and influenced designs still used today. Through training doctrine, equipment design, and relentless personal example, Askins helped shape what modern federal firearms training would become. But the world was about to demand far more from him. When World War II erupted, Askins transitioned from the Army Reserve into active service, aided by his longtime colleague General Julian Hatcher. The Army needed officers who understood weapons, logistics, and pressure, and Askins fit perfectly. He led ordnance recovery teams during campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, and Europe. These missions required entering contested areas to retrieve, repair, and redistribute weapons, often under fire. During the Normandy campaign, Askins carried a Colt New Service revolver, valuing its reliability in damp, chaotic conditions. Later operations took him into dense urban environments where close-quarters combat demanded discipline and restraint. But what war did to his skins wasn't just physical. It deepened a relationship with danger that would follow him long after the fighting ended. Combat reinforced the traits he had always possessed: calmness under fire, comfort with violence, and an unwavering belief in decisive action. For some men, war tempers instinct. For Askins, it sharpened it. After the war, Askins continued government service as a military attaché and advisor at the U.S. Embassy in Spain. There, he helped modernize arms and ammunition manufacturing in a nation still recovering from civil war and isolation. Spain also offered him a return to hunting, something he embraced deeply. But unlike many sportsmen, Askins grew increasingly concerned with conservation, writing about overhunting and the need for responsible wildlife management. His next assignment took him even further to Vietnam, during the early years of American involvement. There, while serving as an advisor, Askins was involved in an incident during a hunting trip where he used a .44 Magnum revolver against a combatant. The episode, occurring far from the Southwest where his career began, symbolized how his life tracked America's expanding global footprint. During his overseas service, Askins completed airborne qualification programs in both Spain and Vietnam, earning jump wings under two different militaries. By the time he stopped parachuting, he had completed 132 documented jumps. Danger, once again, was not something he avoided. After retiring from government service in 1963, Askins turned fully to writing. He became one of the most prolific firearms authors of the 20th century, publishing over 1,000 articles in major magazines and authoring numerous books on pistol shooting, shotgun sports, hunting, and history. Titles like The Art of Handgun Shooting and The Pistol Shooter's Book became foundational texts. But it was his autobiography, Unrepentant Sinner, that ignited controversy. In it, Askins spoke openly, sometimes brutally, about violence, race, and his own psychological makeup. He admitted questioning whether his comfort with killing signaled something deeply wrong within him. And this is where modern readers struggle, because Askins knew something about himself that many heroes never admit. By today's standards, many of his views are deeply problematic. His language reflects the racial prejudices of his era, and his descriptions of armed encounters often lack the restraint modern law enforcement doctrine demands. Historians remain divided. Some see him as a product of his time, shaped by frontier culture, war, and institutional blind spots. Others argue that even within his era, Askins pushed moral boundaries too far. He died in 1999, leaving behind a legacy that refuses simple classification. Charles Askins lived a life that didn't fit neatly into any era. He was part frontier throwback, part modern military officer, part master instructor, and part deeply flawed human being. His story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths that skill does not guarantee wisdom, that courage does not equal morality, and that legends often survive because they challenge us, not because they reassure us. Askins didn't just study the Old West. He carried its mindset into a world that was trying to move beyond it. And whether we admire him, criticize him, or wrestle with his contradictions, one thing is certain: his story still matters. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most controversial figures connected to the American frontier spirit, leave a comment below with your thoughts on Charles Askins. Who should we explore next? And don't forget to subscribe to American Old West Facts, because the frontier is full of legends. And not all of them are comfortable.